Netflix members? I need the arms. And how many are paying? Ah. Well, I want you to think for a moment. On a scale of 0 to 10, where 0 sucks and 10 is awesome, how likely would you be to recommend Netflix to a friend or a colleague? My helpers behind the mirror, the clicker, is not advancing for me. So how many of you, think for a moment, 10 is awesome, 0 is sucky, you can pick any number in between. How many would give it a 9 or a 10? And how many would give it a 7 or an 8? And how many would give it a 0 to 6? I'm looking very carefully. I love the detractors in the room. What would make it better?
Better content.
He wants better content. What else do you want better of? Oh, gosh, give it to me for free, right? Any number of things. All right, so I just magically calculated the Net Promoter Score with my super glasses. It's 78. Usually Netflix is in the high 70s, which is really a remarkable thing. But what I really love are those detractors. And they help me to do my job better and better. And it's trying to understand the 0 to the 6 that are just inherently unsatisfied that makes building products in the long term just a delightful and wonderful thing for me. So I want to tell you just a little bit about my journey. First, I'm older than dirt. I started at Electronic Arts in 1991, making bang, bang, shoot 'em up games. And these are all the letters that I read from these capital G gamers. I was trained in customer focus. I listened carefully to customers. I was trained to be competitive. I had a picture of my competitor on my desk. And the job was about satisfying folks. And none of this was as helpful as I hoped. The big deal for me was a little later. I went on to, like if I bounce it off my teeth, I went on to build kids software. So this is my first hit, Sesame Street Elmo's Preschool. And this is when Oprah Winfrey threw Tickle Me Elmo's onto the stage. So good luck for me. And then helped to grow this little company called Creative Wonders. Built lots of kids software and then sold that Creative Wonders startup to Kevin O'Leary. This is Mr. Wonderful from Shark Tank. And that company was called The Learning Company. He was the CEO of the company. And then we sold that company to Mattel for $3.5 billion, which is how Kevin made his money. And then something funny happened along the way. 2 years later, Kevin had gone, I had gone, and the company got spit back out by Mattel, and now it was worth only $350 million. And it got me reflecting about how I had failed to create long-term value that was hard to copy. And then in 2005, I met Reed Hastings. He's the CEO of Netflix. I don't know if you remember, but Netflix started with DVDs by mail. There's always some people in the audience who don't know what a DVD is. But he really had 2 questions of me in the interview, and newsflash, I got the job. The first question was, hey, Gib, can you delight customers? And I had the good luck that his kids had used Sesame Street Elmo's Preschool and were delighted by it. And his second question was, can you do consumer science? And luckily, I'd asked him what he wanted his legacy to be. And it wasn't to invent internet TV. It wasn't to dent the universe. It was this idea of consumer science. And the way he would describe himself is, unlike Steve Jobs, who has this sense of fashion, a style, and can guess the future, Reed would describe himself as sort of a geeky engineer. And he just wanted to create this system where we could test anything, and via that, just have remarkable consumer insight. So I'm going to take you on 2 journeys today. The first is from my world of customer focus. It was a good world. I had learned to satisfy customers. I had learned to listen to them. And I had learned to compete. And into this world that I have really loved for the last really 10 or 15 years, which is about customer obsession. This world where you're focused on delighting your customers, that you're experimenting and inventing the future. And if you do it correctly, you can do it in these wonderfully hard-to-copy ways where really you're not particularly aware of competing with anyone. The other part of the journey is, this is the really sucky site of Netflix from 1999. If there's designers in the room, my theory is that all startups suck at the beginning, and this was certainly the case. A disk would cost you about $5. It would magically arrive in the mail about 7 days later. This is how it started, and this was my experience the other night. So I want to talk about how that happened. There's really 3 chapters for me today. The first is I describe it as the DHM model. And then the second, I'm going to talk about consumer science, and I'm going to talk about it in one area of Netflix, which is how the personalization evolved really over 15 years. And then the third is a case. Netflix has a question, a problem that it would love your help in solving. And it's a very simple one, which is at the end of your 1-month free trial as a member, should they send a reminder? Should they text folks? Should they send an email? Should, on their personalized homepage, say, your free trial is about to end? Should we do that? So this DHM model, the way that I view my job as a product leader is really quite simple. My job is to delight customers in hard-to-copy, margin-enhancing ways. That's it. It's quite simple. So I want to take you through some of the balancing act involved in this model. So the first is, I know how to delight you even more, which is, what if we took the price of Netflix and did it in half? In that case, there wouldn't be much by way of margin. There wouldn't be the money you need to reinvest in making an even better product in the future. So I'm going to show you the results of an early test where we really got into how do you think about this balancing act. And it's called the perfect new release test. So in the old days, movies would come out in theaters, and 2 months later, the DVD would be available to all of you. And we knew that we needed 100,000 copies, but we could only afford 50,000 copies. So a lot of folks just simply had to wait in line. And so if we listened carefully via qualitative, focus groups, or the customer service data, everything was saying the same thing to us, which is, hey, Gib, the product would be a lot better if you could get the new releases quickly. That would be awesome. So what we did is we tested it. So think for a moment, Netflix, 1 million customers at the time, and you have a test cell with about 10,000 folks. And those 10,000 folks are in this perfect new release experiment. And they get the DVD they want, the one that they added to the top of the quay, because that's how Americans said it. That disc would show up the next day in the mail. And the question is, did that make their experience better? Now, the way we measured delight, it was all about retention. And the opposite of that is cancel. So in the old days of Netflix, about 10% of the members would cancel each month. That's bad. Today, it's about 2% cancel each month. And one of those points is because there is no money in their account. And the second is because it's summer and maybe they shouldn't be binge watching. Okay? So that's a remarkable improvement. So back at the time, when we did this test, now think for a moment, how many of you believe that this test will change customer behavior? That you will see a change from those folks that are in the perfect new release test? I want to see the arms. Okay. So in fact, we did see a change in customer behavior. It improved, but only slightly. It was quite a surprise to us. The folks in that perfect experience only canceled at a rate of 4.45% each month. And this was a bit of a surprise to us. We expected to see a bigger change in behavior. And now I'm going to talk with you about how we saw the balancing act between those two things. The way we thought of it is we saved 5,000 customers in this case. And the value to us of these customers was, we said, it was worth about $1 million. And the derivation of that was pretty simple. We saved 5,000 customers, and the lifetime value of a customer at that point in time was about $100. And then we multiplied it by 2 for a word-of-mouth effect, which is to say that person was delighted with the service, they told their friends about it. And that was the word-of-mouth factor. Our CFO was not very happy with this model, but what we did was it essentially instrumented doubling down for delight in our customer base. So on the other side, the additional inventory of getting these expensive new releases at a level where we could ship them the next day in the mail to everyone, In this case, it cost us about $5 million. So we're gaining 1 million, we're losing 5 million. Do you roll out the test to all? The answer was pretty straightforward. No. And in fact, as a startup, we couldn't afford that investment at the time. Now, there are some folks out there that would maintain that you should do it. In fact, Amazon uses a word of mouth factor like 8x. And if you do the math there, they would have said, do it. We just didn't have the money to do it. So the second part of this model is doing stuff that's hard to copy. So H.B. Mock was a bright product manager. He was absolutely delighted about this new member page. The happy family on the couch caused more folks to engage in the free trial. I'm like, that's awesome, HB. I want you to do more stuff like this in the future, but I'm going to give you super bonus points. That's what I called them. If you can also do stuff that's wonderfully hard to copy. Because I'm going to guess that those folks from Blockbuster, within about a month, are going to have a happy family on a couch, which is exactly what happened. So in this notion, start thinking for a moment about what are all the things that are hard to copy about dear Netflix. Why would you, as a punk startup, not choose to compete with Netflix? What have they got that's hard to copy? It's a real question. They've got a ton of content. What else they got?
License agreements.
Oh, they got a ton of content. What else do they got? They've got a ton of customer data, some unique technology that revolves around personalization. They know the member taste of 130 million people worldwide. The content, the reason that they have that content is they're huge and they have a huge economy of scale. They can afford to spend $8 billion this year against poor Amazon's $3 billion and poor Hulu's $2 billion. This huge economy of scale. What else is hard to copy about what Netflix does? Built-in smart TVs was the answer. There's an incredible network effect. This device ecosystem, any television you buy today is magically wired for Netflix. All these things are wonderfully hard to copy. Now, I put kind of a bizarre thing at the bottom of the list. It's called counter-positioning, and it doesn't happen very often, but I was super delighted that it happened in the case of Netflix. So there's H.B. Mock. This is apparently wicked easy to copy until we did this thing. No late fees. In this case, Blockbuster could not copy it because half of their revenue and half of their high margin came from those damn late fees. And this is sort of the beginning of the end for poor Blockbuster, all right? Which is now a pet store in Burlingame. So sad. I think the word for that is Schadenfreude. All right. So now the thing is, think about all the theories and hypotheses. That's how I think about product strategies, of all the ways that Netflix could delight customers in hard-to-copy, margin-enhancing ways. It could be one of these things. It could be two of these things. It could be three of these things. And now I want you to think for a moment. These are all the high-level theories and hypotheses over like 10 years. What percentage of time did Netflix get it right? And the answer is they got it right about, wait for it, half the time. And for me, this is one of the things, the secret to success at Netflix is essentially high cadence failure. So think for a moment, it's 2005, 2006, 2007. Every frickin' VC is saying the same thing, which is, have you noticed Facebook? Like, hey, what's your social strategy? And we experiment with this thing called Friends. That was our social strategy. We pounded on it for 3 years. The idea was you'd get great movie ideas from your friends. They'd be less expensive. You wouldn't leave because there was a network effect. And after 3 years, we kind of figured it out. And of course, it had worked for music. And what we figured out is really two main issues. Your friends have sucky movie tastes. That was thing number one. And the second is you don't really want your friends to know everything you're watching. So this was a failed theory. The stuff on the top worked quite well. Now, there were some other surprises. We actually tested it in 2007 exclusives. It was the beginning of original content. It failed. But by 2013, House of Cards, with that economy of scale, it finally worked. We opened up all of our APIs to let 1,000 flowers bloom, and none bloomed. But out of those things, original content worked later, and actually the open APIs were the things that fueled that wonderfully hard-to-copy thing, this device ecosystem. So if I wanted it to look smart, these were the 5 high-level strategies that ended up working. And it took us a while to get there. And for me, with product strategy, I'm always pounding on a set of high-level theories that answer the question, how do you delight customers in hard-to-copy, margin-enhancing ways? And then at any moment in time, there's a variety of tactics or projects against those. And then retention was the big dog at Netflix, but we had proxy metrics. The challenge of retention is it's wicked hard to move. And so we had a number of proxy metrics that helped us to evaluate whether these strategies were working. And we would pound on them. And I'll show you what pounding on them looks like in a minute when I get into personalization. But I look for this lockup of strategy, metrics, and the tactics at any moment in time. So now I'm going to get into consumer science and the personalized experience that I hope that you are enjoying. Reed's answer about consumer science, it's basically the experimental method. We have a hypothesis, we experiment, we have the data, and then we apply some human judgment to these A/B tests to figure out what to do. And I appreciate that humans are still needed, just for a little longer. At Netflix, the big deal was it was all about consumer insight. It was about guessing what would delight folks, what would not. And in the beginning, maybe we guessed it right about 50% of the time, and maybe our batting average got up to about 70%. And at any moment in time, we were looking for 4 sources of data. So my first day at work, I was presented to the Netflix e-staff metrics, 50 different metrics that helped me to understand customer behavior and what the business looked like. Jake just spent a bunch of time talking about different qualitative sources of trying to get the voice of customer inside their head. I did a survey data with the NPS right out of the gate, and newsflash, I'll do one right at the end as well. And then the big dog, in terms of measuring this balancing act between delight and margin at Netflix were the A/B test. So this is what Netflix looked like in 2005. If you look very carefully, you'll notice that there's really nothing personalized about it. In fact, it's full of these expensive new releases. I want you to notice the word recommendations in the tab. And then something we learned at some point, which is recommendations not really a good word for personalization. And the lesson is talk with folks as though they're human. You don't recommend that somebody go out to coffee on Friday night. You don't recommend a date. If people use that language today, I'm kind of old. You'd say, I think you might enjoy meeting this person. And I'll show in a minute where that's relevant. So like the overall product strategy, I view this as the swimming lane. I had 8 swimming lanes. This is the personalization swimming lane. And there was a strategy for personalization. The first theory was we would collect as much explicit data as we could from you. That ended up being via stars. But there was also an understanding in a world of streaming, the future, that we would also observe what you watched and what you didn't, what you stopped watching 7 minutes in. And then get to know you, and then have all the data about these movies, and then magically connect them via algorithms and these different presentation layer tactics. And there was one more theory, which is if we could help you to find movies that you loved more and more, and the average rating of all those titles went up, you would retain better. And like before, at any moment in time, we had tactics or projects against each of those strategies on the left. And then we had ways at any moment in time of understanding whether or not we were making progress using these proxy metrics. So I'm going to get into all of these tactics, all of these projects. Take you on a little journey. I have about 5 pop quizzes. And you guys know how it ended up for Netflix, but I just want to illustrate how hard it was along the way to do this. Now we're at Netflix circa 2006, 2007. And I want you to think for a moment, this is our proxy metric for personalization. The theory was if you rated a bunch of movies for us, then you must appreciate the result of that. It must be a sign that personalization is important to you. And the proxy metric was what % of customers at the end of their first 6 weeks with the service rated at least 50 movies. 0 to 5%. Raise your hand if you're with me. 5 to 10. 10 to 20. 20 to 30. 30 and more. So you're all curmudgeons. I want to draw your attention to one little thing. Do you see the movies you'll heart tab? Which designers have a technical term for that. It's called fugly, which I think is funky plus ugly. But that little Movies You'll Heart tab attracted a lot of attention, and I'll share with you in a moment what we did with it. So the answer is we got it up to about close to 30%. This explicit data was super important to us, and we simply asked people for it. They would click on the Movies You'll Heart tab, and this was what we called the ratings wizard. The more you rate, the better we'll help you to find movies you'll love. And this was the invention that gave us tons and tons and tons of taste data. So my pop quiz number 2, this is Kristen, my wife, Kelsey, the med school kid, is 23. Brittany, with eyes closed, is 21. That's me, an awkward 56. And here's the question. Will demographic data help predict movie taste? It's a simple question. This is a yes-no question. So how many people believe, yes, demographic data will be helpful? And how many people believe no? Good, and some people don't have arms. Yeah, a surprising result. It wasn't helpful. You know, it's the beginning of understanding that movie tastes are wonderfully unique. And the way that we knew, this is called RMSE. You like Star Wars and Star Trek. We predicted 4 stars for it. You gave it exactly 4 stars. We were perfect in guessing. And you like Star Trek and Star Wars. Just nod. Yes? Oh. And we thought, oh, that was close. We thought it would be 4 star, and it was 4. We predicted your movie taste perfectly. And in this case, RMSE is all about driving it down and to the right. In this case, we added the demographic data, and it didn't improve RMSE. A big surprise to us. The big dog for us was collaborative filtering. So we know that you like Star Wars and Star Trek, and you love Hotel Rwanda. And because you like Star Wars and Star Trek, we think you'll like Hotel Rwanda as well. No context for why that might be, but that's how collaborative filtering works writ large. In this case, somebody has added icon to their queue, and because they like icon, this is called the QACL, the QAdd confirmation layer. So you've just added icon to the queue, and it's saying because you liked icon, you'll like mostly Martha and only human. And this drove about 20% of our QAds, this one page here. And it was an illustration of how collaborative filtering was helpful to us. Now, we had a little problem with collaborative filtering. We had one engineer, his name was Stan Lanning. We needed more, so we outsourced it. Does anyone here remember the Netflix prize? Yeah, so we put it out. We said we'll give $1 million to anybody who can improve our collaborative filtering algorithm. We had about 10,000 engineers sign up for it, which is really remarkable. And if you look, this is the leaderboard. And if you look at the team names, it gives you one of the first insights that came to us. So look very carefully. There's a team there. It's called Opera Solutions and Vandelay United. Okay? So we know they're into Seinfeld. But all these team names, if you look carefully, what was going on was that a team would realize they weren't going to win the $1 million, and they combined their algorithms with the teams that were just above them or below them, and it actually pushed them up the ladder. And so the main insight was the more algorithms, the better. And the second was all those ratings that we got while people were on their ratings wizard JAG, turns out those were not nearly as valuable as the ones as we got when you were with the service and you rated the movie in real time, because people kind of forget stuff. So my third pop quiz, we execute. We put this magnificent new algorithm into test to see if it will improve retention. And how many people believe that retention will improve because of this better algorithm? And how many people believe the opposite? Oh gosh, turns out it was not helpful. But this was really a remarkable, and the insight, and this is, if you're a designer, I love you. It was, most of the insight came from a combination of stuff people could see, the presentation layer, tactics, plus the engineering work. The main thing about the Netflix prize was it was really, really, really good for recruiting engineers. Because before that, like, it was not cool to work at Netflix, okay? So that was just a big and wonderful surprise. And so now we have this insight that the more algorithms, the better. And we have our friends over across the bay at Pandora. They had something called the Music Genome Project. It was a cool job. You were a musicologist. You would tag the different attributes of all these different songs. So Jack Johnson, acoustic, slow-paced, for 56-year-old people who like to surf. That was what a musicologist did. I'm in. And then we hired a bunch of movie colleges, 50 folks down in LA. Their job, it's a cool job, was to tag the movies on zillions of different attributes. And we called this the category interest algorithm. So you see here, because I liked Airplane, it believes that I'll like Ferris Bueller's Day Off and The Breakfast Club in this category of movies that are all about cult comedies from the 1980s. And this is true. Again, I'm over-revealing my movie tastes. And this was a big and helpful thing for helping connect folks with movies that they would love. So Crystal Chencudi's job is to make it super easy for folks to add at least 6 DVDs to their queue in the course of a month. And she's driving it up and to the right. Things are good. And then around 2009, things head south. Because of streaming. And it was Brent Avery's job to drive the percentage of members who watched at least 15 minutes in a month, the smallest TV episode. He's driving it up and to the right. And you can see around 2010, it's off to the races. And now, finally, Netflix, that no longer has to create a DVD by mail service, integrating with post office, et cetera, is a streaming-only company, and that lets them go international. And I hope this isn't French, because my 4th pop quiz is really simple. Is it helpful to know that a person is French, that they live in France? How many people believe it's helpful? The yeses. And how many people believe the opposite? No. And a lot of you have lost your muscle tone in your arms. I notice these things. Gosh, it's amazing. Movie tastes are incredibly unique. It's much more helpful to know just a few movies that people like than knowing that they're French. So the answer is it didn't help improve RMSE to know that someone was French. Yeah, wild. All right, so then our dear friends at Facebook. Netflix has now collected billions of ratings, star ratings. And is it a 3? Is it a 4? Is it 2? Whatever. And lots of explicit data from you. And then Facebook's out there with this other model. It's pretty simple, thumbs up or thumbs down. So Netflix tests it, and they get twice as much taste data. It's just a simpler and easier thing. You don't have to parse if it's 3 or 4 stars. And that sort of begs the question of, like, OK, what about the stars? What do you do with the stars? Well, remember my 4th theory? The 4th theory was that over time, the average rating of the movies that you watch would get higher and higher, and because of that, you would retain better. But there was no data to support that, which was a real head-scratcher. It drove Netflix to talk to customers and focus groups and figure out what the heck was going on. It was a real mystery. And the insight was that movie rating, having high-star movie, it's not the same as movie enjoyment. That movie enjoyment drives retention. And I'll illustrate in a moment how to think about that. So most of you, if we met at some event, we'd say, yeah, I loved Hotel Rwanda, or I love some intellectual documentary, because that's the kind of person I am. And what we started to discover is that there's something else going on. That there's a lot of people out there that like Paul Blart's Mall Cop. Okay? I heard somebody applaud over there. And the key thing is, yeah, those are 3-star movies against the 5-star Hotel Rwanda. But there's a lot of enjoyment in Paul Blart's Mall Cop. In fact, so much that they had to do version 2, okay? Which I've heard is really good. But if you look carefully about the big investments that Netflix made with original content, pretty quickly, Adam Sandler, they did a 6-movie deal with him. One of them was called The Ridiculous 6, which apparently the review said, for those that found 100 Ways to Die in the West, intellectually demanding, The Ridiculous 6 is for you. And these were 6 leave your brains at the door comedies that clearly helped drive movie enjoyment, which clearly helped drive retention. So there's Netflix without the stars. And if you look carefully, Casino, for me, it's a 98% match. It doesn't say anything about the quality of it, just that I will enjoy it. And that's the system that Netflix has today. So my fifth pop quiz question, it's a little tricky. Today, Netflix has 2,000 classifications that sort of loosely describing our movie taste. For me, they have a list from the one I will enjoy the most to the least, and then they do these filters. They can create different row structures. So here's the filter for me of recently added titles. And then you can see other rows. Here are some trending now. Now, just newsflash, trending now is actually a personalized list for me. They just know that I'm interested in that phrase. And again, I'm revealing way too much about my movie taste. But here's the question, which is, should the site experience be consistent for me? Should these row structures be the same each time I come there? Usually there's recently added, at some point there's continue watching. Should it be the same for me whether I'm on a desktop or on a phone? Or should it change every time I come back? Should it be different from my daughters and from my wife? And where most of us are trained about the idea of design, it should be simple and it should be consistent. You can't let these row structures go crazy and move all over through place and time. But this was tested. So think for a moment. The question is, should the site structure be personalized? Should you let these rows change from time of day, for platform, for person? Should you let the rows free? So how many people believe that the site structure should be highly personalized? And how many people believe the opposite? Yeah, and you're coming along with me. So in this case, the highly personalized, inconsistent structure inspired more watching. Really a remarkable result. And it also shows the mentality of Netflix of, let's test it and see what happens. But it was a surprise to all. So what I love about personalization, this is what it looks like today for me. It's on all devices. Tons of original content through that economy of scale. And then it's highly personalized for each member of the family or whatever device you're on. It's wonderfully simple, and then it's super instant. So click on button and go. It's all a good thing. What I love about personalization is over time, it has enabled the troika of delighting customers in hard-to-copy, margin-enhancing ways. In the old days of DVD, with 100,000 DVDs to choose from, its job was to make it easy to find something that you love. Today, personalization's job is really about helping Netflix to right-size its investment in original content. So I'll explain. How many of you have watched Stranger Things? So about 100 million folks go for it, and Netflix can afford to spend $500 million on that. And how many people are with me with BoJack Horseman? Okay? So there's about 2 million folks that love BoJack Horseman, and Netflix can consequently afford to spend $10 million on it. And that's what they're doing. If you look carefully at the 23 Emmys that they won about a month ago, they're essentially a collection of niches that they're doing this targeting. All they need to do is get the right level of investment because they know your movie tastes. And they can predict how many hours will be watched for Stranger Things or for a BoJack Horseman. And it's just a wonderful thing today. So I told you that Netflix needs your help. It's a simple question. Today, a new member signs up. And they get 1 month free. And there's really no notification, no nothing, saying your free trial is about to end. And what happens is there's a lot of phone calls from folks on day 31, 32, 33 saying, gosh, I meant to cancel, but I forgot. And Netflix does the right thing. They back out the charges. I don't know if it was summer and they shouldn't be binge watching or if it's a person that loves free stuff. I have no idea. But at the end of the day, those phone calls cost the company about $10 million. So Netflix structured a test. Now, I want you to think for a moment. I got to give you some existing data here. I want you to think for a moment of what percentage of folks click the red button, hand over their credit card to sign up for a free trial. And it's between 0 and 100. A substantial clue. What would your guesses be for this number? And I'm going to give you a tiny clue. This number is always smaller than everyone anticipates. What number is it? Yeah, I'm hearing a couple of not confident answers. It's about 2%. It's surprisingly low. But this is part of the existing data that everybody at Netflix is grounded in. And then the key piece of data here is month 1 retention. At the end of that free trial, what % of customers go on to the paid service? And this one is surprisingly high. Do I have any guesses? OK, I'm hearing some 70s over here. And the surprise is it's about 90%. 90% go into the paid service. So Netflix A/B tested it. Super aggressive. Text shows up on a personalized homepage. You get an email. Your free trial is about to end. Do you think this changed customer behavior? How many people believe there's a measurable change in customer behavior because of this test? I'm seeing about half. And yes, there is a change. Month 1 retention drops from 90% to around 85%. That's a change. And now I want you to start thinking about this model of delighting customers in hard-to-copy, margin-enhancing ways. And you're the product manager for this page, and you just lost the company $60 million, right? So we'll back out the 10 million, because you're not answering the phone calls. You've lost $50 million. And that's the margin story. What about the delight story? Does this delight customers? A reminder that you should cancel now? OK, I got some no's here and a lot of heavy yesing over there. OK? Another thing to think about is how would you feel about Netflix if I end up telling you that they chose to do this? How would you feel about Netflix, the company, if they were super aggressive about letting folks know that their free trial is ending? My guess is you're going to feel a little bit better about it. So the delight is for those folks. They got the reminder. And also this feeling of feeling better about Netflix. And what is the hard-to-copy thing that's at stake in this one little test? What is it? OK, so the answer is some economy of scale. Not everybody else can afford to do this. Netflix is big enough to do it. What else is at stake here on the hard-to-copy list? It's the brand. It's the relationship of trust that you have. Most of you are happily handing over your credit card. So on one hand, we've got some potential delight. This is brand enhancing. And brands are wicked hard to copy. Like, you know who owns Red in this hemisphere. And then we're losing $50 million. Now, who makes this decision at Netflix? Whose decision is it? Who what? The answers I'm used to hearing is the CEO, and it's not. Another one is the CFO, and it's not. This is the product manager's job. This is, in this case, it was Tom. It was his job. And in this case at Netflix, there's a wonderful debate. Tom, what are you smoking? You're going to lose $50 million. Or someone else saying, gosh, I think this is worthwhile for doing. This is how we build an even stronger brand in the future. And there's open fighting back and forth over about 20 minutes. And then Tom decides what to do. And in this case, he decided to roll it out to all. And everybody magically gets behind him, even the folks that thought he was smoking something, right? It's really remarkable. So it was launched to all. And so the key learnings for me, today Netflix can afford this model of delight trumps margin. They can do this long-term thing. Remember, in the new release test, they could not afford to do it. And there's a cost to doing the right thing and to building a brand. In this case, it's $50 million. And then the key insight from Tom realized that this was actually a low-stakes decision. And it was low stakes for two reasons. One, he could reverse it at any time. And then, quite frankly, he understood that $50 million against a company that's doing $8 billion in revenues, this was not material. So, and most of us think of these decisions as being a lot harder to make than they truly are. In fact, most of them are reversibles. And then the last thing, I've revealed a little bit about the Netflix culture, this environment of debate, decide, and do. And that's been super helpful in decision-making at the company. So there's really three more things that are required. So here's Reed. The first is courage. So Netflix took about 30 minutes to make the decision to do the $100 million investment in House of Cards. It was not, and it was the beginning of Netflix's effort to out HBO, but before HBO tried to out Netflix. And I know, or at least I think I know who's winning that. And the other thing that was remarkable, it took one day before when Kevin Spacey was accused of sexual harassment of a teenage boy. Within a day, Netflix had made the decision to cut Kevin Spacey. Remarkable courage on both sides of the equation. The other thing that I nicely remind folks is how much patience is required. It only takes 20 years to build a great company, okay? And if you look very carefully, there's a time period where I started to think, yeah, maybe Kelsey and Brittany, we can afford college and medical school. And close to 2012, the market cap got all the way up to 40 billion and then dropped to 10 billion, like instantly. Does anybody remember what happened then? It was that damn Quickster thing. The decision to separate the DVD and the streaming business from each other, which brings me to my third point, which is humility. So you can get confident about your ability to guess, to figure out the balancing act of all these things, but from time to time you're going to get it wrong. Reed, in talking about this decision, says he forgot to obsess over the customers. He didn't fully fathom the degree to which they would see this separation as a price increase, and how incredibly inconvenient it would be to go to two different websites, one to manage your DVDs and the other one for streaming. And so this was really a lesson in humility. All right, so I work with lots of different companies. What I look for in a customer-obsessed culture is really 5 things. I look for that existing data. I look for the metrics that help me understand both the business behavior and the customer behavior. I look for the work which really helps to bring the voice of customer, the why customers are doing things, the focus groups, the qual, the one-on-one. I look for the survey data. Every month at Netflix, I understood why people were canceling. I gave you an example of NPS, which for startups are a super helpful way for me to understand, do they have product market fit? And the big dog is A/B testing. It's the only way that I found to do this balancing act between delight and margin. And then my last thing is, do they have a strategy? Do they have a set of hypotheses that helps me to understand how they will delight customers in these hard-to-copy, margin-enhancing ways? So for me, customer obsession is putting the customer at the center of everything you do to delight customers in hard-to-copy, margin-enhancing ways to invent a better future for them. And with that, I'd like to say thank you. So I'm going to stand here awkwardly. Many of you have seen street performers do their thing, and then as soon as they pass the hat, everybody leaves. Okay? And I'm not asking for money. I am obsessed, so I would love, love, love it if you would go to www.gibsonbiddle.com. I'm not selling anything. I don't do advertising. I'm not going to collect your email. I'd just love it if you click on the top link that you find there. There's a PDF with a presentation. There's also an article, a recent article on customer obsession. And then I have an experiment for you, whether this will be the first moment in time that a QR code is actually helpful, okay? So if you have an iPhone, I believe if you hold up your iPhone as though you're taking a picture, you don't need an app, it'll automatically pull up the link where you can give the feedback. This is cool because it looks like you're all taking a picture of me. Okay, did it work? Yeah. All right, okay. So I would love your feedback. And with that, I really do have time to answer some questions for you. So I'd love to hear questions that you have. Thanks so much for the feedback as well in advance.
Great, thank you so much. Let's get another round of applause. That was amazing. So we have a couple questions. Thanks for leaving the time for that too.
Yeah.
John T. Craighead says, what had to change? What were some of the challenges in expanding internationally? And how did you remain focused on the customer when learning about these new international segments?
Yeah, so I look for startups with proof of concept that are ready to scale and then scale them. And at some point in that journey, I was on to my next startup. I will tell you that the challenges that Netflix had, at first they tried to keep everybody in Los Gatos and expand without having feet on the street in the different countries. And then it was like anything, they learned the hard way. So in South America, for instance, the feedback system said that customers love the service. It turns out that folks in Buenos Aires are just nicer. So they said the service is great, and then they freaking canceled, okay? Or the other thing is that there's a lot of huge differences they found in that country that had to do with payment systems. And so like invention of anything, there was a lot of learning by doing, and then rapid iteration based on the learning, just like everything that we had grown up doing.
Great. So one thought when I heard you describe hard to copy, because I think in the Bay Area especially, we often think maybe of just brand or hard to copy as something about technical firepower or the resources you have available. I was wondering if you could speak to some examples, novel examples or interesting examples of hard to copy that people might assume, well, of course Netflix is hard to copy in these ways, but what are some other ways that folks can be hard to copy that are not normally intuitive?
So I didn't write this book, but there's a book called 7 Powers. The guy's name is Hellman, and he argues that there are 7 things that are hard to copy. I actually argue that 8, and I'm arguing with him. I think of it slightly different, but the job of a startup is to get big. Because later on, if you get big, if you have product market fit, if you figure out how to scale, then you can enjoy economies of scale, then you can enjoy the value of brand, then you can enjoy the device ecosystem or the network effect. I gave you the most surprising one, this counter positioning. You rarely see that. Some other things that I'm used to seeing that are hard to copy, unique technology, that's what I argue about with Hellman. Personalization, I think, is a great example of that. There's another thing called process power. So think about Toyota. Toyota figured out how to build cars. They actually gave access to all the other car companies to see how they were doing it, and nobody else could replicate this magic process power. There's an argument that Netflix has some process power in their ability to greenlight 1,000 TV and movie shows in the course of a year to encrypt all of those for devices all over the world. My guess is they have some substantial hard-to-copy process power. The key thing for a startup is you got to get big to enjoy some of these hard-to-copy things down the line.
Great.
And that book is freaking awesome. 7 Powers by Hellman.
Awesome. So one question that I had was that delight customers frequently gets bandied around. It's sort of easy thing to talk about, but then it's hard to really communicate to people what delight customers means. So how, when you have had new people join teams, what examples do you give that really speak to what delight customers means versus maybe the lip service people give to delighting customers?
I found somewhat the opposite, that people are pretty intuitive about understanding how to delight customers. What they don't give the extra time and thinking to is the balancing act with margin and doing the hard to copy as well. But when I'm working with different companies, it starts for me as a creative exercise. Tell me all the things that you think will potentially delight your customers in the future, and brainstorm, and then do the same. Like the business model experimentation has to happen forever. I mean, Netflix has been experimenting with the different pricing and plans and business model forever. And then the hard to copy I've talked about. But combining those 3 ideas into one, that's where you have these high-level hypotheses, and you'll get it right about half the time if you're good.
Got it. So one last question. For those hiring maybe associate PMs or junior product managers or junior folks on the team, how do you instill that level of humility? Because you seem to get 2 tracks. Some people come in really you know, they're going to change everything. They understand everything. And then you get some folks who are more timid. They might have a lot of humility. They might be a little bit scared about what to do. So how do you balance? How do you take both of those sort of personalities to a place where they have that deep level of humility?
Yeah, so I have the opposite problem, which is for folks younger in their career, I'm always encouraging them to be braver. And that usually means tapping into sort of their superpowers. Mine early on, I was good with the qualitative and getting ideas from qualitative and then learning how to A/B test them. But for product leaders that are earlier in their life, I just nicely encourage them to spend a lot of time understanding the customer through those 4 different lenses: the existing, the survey, the A/B test, and the qualitative. And I think different people are more skillful in each of those areas. But try to be sort of the smartest person in the room along one of those dimensions. And frankly, be brave. Like when the CEO asks the question, like, do you think this is a good idea or a bad idea? Ask the CEO like 10 or 15 questions so you can begin to frame an opinion for yourself, and then tell that person what you think. So I'm generally encouraging folks earlier in their career just to be braver.
Great. Thank you so much, Gibson. Thanks a lot, everyone. Enjoy lunch. Tarek's here to have some parting words.
And do the survey. I'd love the feedback. So thank you so much. Goodbye.